next up, we'll focus on the Indian technology space. And before we invite Kawaljeet Saluja of Kotak Institutional Equities, let's just quickly apprise our viewers of some of the recent developments. One, are we seeing increased aggression from Indian IT companies to go ahead and make acquisitions? So yesterday, we were talking about Tata Tech making the German acquisition of S-Tech. In the month of August, it was Wipro which acquired a Samsung subsidiary called Harman for about $375 million. So at a time when growth is slowing down, will Indian IT companies buy their way through growth? Secondly, we also saw that buyback announcement from Infosys, a large one, the largest ever on record, 18,000 crore at a price of 1,800 rupees. Thirdly, US tech continues to remain fired up. Last week, we had Oracle, which fired its bazooka and that big guidance on cloud infrastructure revenues for 2030. Yesterday, Alphabet hit $3 trillion in terms of market capitalization. Nasdaq has seen its 26th record close for the year. Nasdaq is up 20% year to date, while Indian IT index is down close to about 17%. And finally, the debate on AI opportunity versus threat continues. And here referencing the Kotak note, which we'll discuss with Kawaljeet, they're saying that they believe generative AI can negatively impact revenue growth by 2 to 3%, at least for the next 2 to 3 years. After that, there will be opportunity, but first there will be a deflationary impact and then the expansion. So on that note, let me invite Kawaljeet Saluja, Head of Research at Kotak Institutional Equities, on the show now. Thank you very much for joining in. First, give us your top-down view on Indian IT.
Well, the Indian IT right now is in the slow growth lane. There are three factors impacting the growth rate. Macro is something which is impacting the growth rate by around 200 to 250 basis points. You have captive shifts, which is impacting the industry growth rate by around 100 to 125 basis points. And then there is a generative AI impact as well in fiscal 2026, which can impact the industry growth rate, in our view, by around 100 to 150 basis points. And that's something which will accelerate in FY 2027. Now, as we move into FY27, our base case is that the macro headwinds kind of reduce. So that helps the industry growth rate by around 250 basis points. And the hit on growth rate because of captive shift also reduces somewhat as such. Now, offsetting that, there is some incremental impact from generative AI deflationary impact. But what you would have is a net result in which basically the growth rates in FY 2027 improves here. Now, this hit of generative AI would be higher for incumbents as compared to challengers. When taking valuations as well as the overall growth scenario into consideration and the acceleration that we see in FY27, our top bets on the sector are Infosys, Mahindra, Coforge, and Hexaware.
So on Infosys, for the buyback, would you recommend subscribe? It's at 1,800 and your own target price is at 1,850 on Infosys.
I'm restricted by compliance to comment on the buyback.
Kawaljeet, hi, morning. Great to have you in. So, slightly more medium-term question. You were talking about the impact of generative AI on, large-cap Indian companies. So, is there a rough number or a range to this? I mean, how do we quantify the impact, if at all, over how many quarters? That's my first question. I'll come to the second question later. But that one first. What happens over the next couple of quarters?
Okay, so I think the question was medium term, but switched to a couple of quarters. But I just give you a medium term perspective and the quarterly perspective both. So look, the impact on large companies will be higher because they're incumbents sitting with a large book of business, which is more amenable to deflationary risk as compared to the challengers, which will use this as an opportunity to make way with the larger clients and as well as displace incumbents as well in a few situations. So our view is that for incumbents, the hit of generative AI on the overall growth rate would be around 300 basis points for the next 3 years, starting fiscal 2026, accelerates in FY27, moderate somewhat in FY 2028 as such. The gross hit on the industry growth rate, incidentally, is 5%. But our base case assumption is that roughly around 5% per annum for 3 years. Now, base case assumption is the fact that to make the best use of generative AI, you need to invest in the data foundation. You also have to invest in modernization of core systems. And that's something which will be accelerated. So which is where the net impact of 200 to 300 basis points at the industry level and approximately assume 300 basis points for the incumbents or the large companies as such. Specifically for the next 2 quarters, if that was the intent, then next 2 quarters will be held hostage to what happens on the macro here.
So, Kawaljeet is just rechecking what you're saying. The gross hit to Indian IT services because of GenAI could be to the tune of 5%. Net impact, okay, and net impact on large IT services companies would be around 300 basis points, right?
Yeah. So, let me just simplify that. 15% impact over a period of 3 years at a gross level. Now, to make use of AI, ultimately, you need to invest in the data foundation. You need to invest into simplifying of core systems. So there'll be some reinvestment to make best use of GenAI. That number would be around 8%. So the gross net impact is 8% over a period of 3 years. So 2.6% impact per annum. Within that, the larger companies will face a bigger impact, which is like a 3% growth impact. Whereas for challengers, the impact will be lower.
Okay, gross impact of 15% over 3 years, net impact of 8% over the next 3 years. Got that.
On a per annum basis, 2.6, yeah.
Got it.
Kawaljeet, I have a morning, Prashant here. Good to see you on the show. I have a slightly non-IT services question. You talk to pretty much all large foreign investors, right, who invest here. Have you, and it's just something that I've thought about, maybe I don't know if it's come to your mind as well. The big sort of, in that sense, apex technology of our times is AI, clearly, as you guys have been talking about as well. And there's been you can call it a chase, a craze, whatever you want to, it depends on who you ask, for these themes, to get exposure to these themes in different markets. And you don't have that here very much, right? A pure kind of play in that sense, at least at a core foundational level. I don't know if you've thought about this question, Kawaljeet. Any thoughts?
Prashant, how many names are there globally in US, barring the 5 magnificent names? Actually, it's max 7, but there are like 4 or 5. How many names do you have exposure to? You look at Salesforce, right? The stock has barely moved in the last 5 years. That's one company which everyone thinks will be impacted by GenAI. There are a whole host of software companies which have barely moved. So at the end of the day, the innovators are and the companies that are reaping the benefits are just a handful globally here. So of course,
no, I mean, Kawaljeet, there are companies in pretty much every geography. Japan has. I mean, I'm talking about the guys who are creating foundational models, but offshoots. I mean, one layer removed. Taiwan, of course, clearly. China, Tencent, Alibaba. I mean, you can call them clearly AI kind of names. You got US, of course, as you said. So. Yeah, I mean, you have. I'm talking about market-specific kind of exposure.
What happens is that in AI, normally the benefits basically are accruing at the semiconductor and the hardware level. If you look at the benefits at the software and the services level, it's been negligible, and which is what the point I was making. That if you look at the Indian IT sector, it's more software and services, and both those segments have been impacted, or at least in the minds of investors, both those segments will be impacted by GenAI. So to that extent, the direct exposure will be just maybe a handful of companies in India.
In terms of capital allocation from here, Kawaljeet, we keep having this debate, and whether they should. Infi, for example, had a small stake in OpenAI. They put some money in many years ago. I mean, or maybe if you can go out, because they are cash-rich companies and they're still throwing cash machines in that sense, right? So are they? Can they, and in your interaction with corporates, management teams, does this come up as a way to leapfrog?
Look, I think if the question is indirectly hinting at why do buybacks and...
No. Buybacks are great. I'm just saying, even after buyback, there's a lot of cash remaining.
Absolutely. Yeah. So look, these are services companies, right? If you're talking about the listed services names, these are services companies. They are competing with the likes of Accenture and a whole host of other companies. And I don't need to say, look at Accenture as well, right? What's happened to the stock, because it's considered to be an AI impacted company or AI loser in a way. So to that extent, there's only that much you can do. I mean, these companies can, of course, use GenAI as an offensive strategy, which is what each of these companies are going to do. Basically, they're going to use the GenAI in a way that reduces the deflationary impact, which is what is also a base case assumption But at the end of the reality is that for the large IT services companies, there will be an impact. Now, for the challengers, they're going to use this in an offensive way. Try to get into clients, basically demonstrate their skill sets, displace incumbents, and become larger. I think that's the natural part of IT services evolution, what we have seen in the last 30 to 40 years, and that's something which will continue to the future as well.
Okay, a great conversation. Kawaljeet, I'm just reiterating your top picks would be Infosys, TCS, Tech Mahindra, and the larger names, and Coforge and Hexaware, right?
Infosys, Tech Mahindra, Coforge, Hexaware.
Okay, top 4 ideas from Kotak. Thank you very much for joining in. Great conversation. Probably have a longer one on this. Can go on and on, right? The Indian IT sector at crossroads and how it's navigating the Gen AI challenge.